So, welcome, Susan. So looking forward to today. I'm so excited to be with you. Welcome.
Thank you, Rosalind, and thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you.
Yes. So, I am going to introduce Susan to you. There's so much in her bio that you can read when you get the recording. You can get all the details. One of the highlights that I want to be sure we cover. So if I'm not good at asking you, maybe you will go over these points. There are a couple of things in our community that people are highly interested in, and that is the movement to your next step. That is something that's big in your bio, big in your life. And like me, you live by it. And what people want to know in this community is, how do you know? And I would just put into words, how can you be sure? And of course, you're never sure, but how do you take that next step? Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So when we talk, if you could cover that, I think that would delight so many people, because they are hungry for, how do other people do this? Right? So I met Susan at the Center for Awakening. I think that was our first connection through Teachers of God. It used to be Teachers of God. Many of you in this community know Teachers of God as Lisa Natoli and Bill Free. But there were many, many important other people around, and Susan became one of those essential people in how that organization worked. And then she started out, from my point of view, as one of the supporters. And then she became a teacher and a minister in her own right, a poet, an author. And I'm not going to tell you where she ended up. I'm going to let her start from being a math teacher and what happened. Would you begin there, telling people?
yeah, yeah, of course, of course. So I was a maths teacher. I came to that late. I didn't go to university to do my maths degree until I was 43. And I became a maths teacher at the age of 47. And after 7 years of being a teacher and being head of year in the high school that I worked in, I had a devastating burnout. I became very, very unwell. I was exhausted, stressed, all the things, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. They were my medical diagnoses. And so I left being a teacher. I had to take early retirement on health grounds. And when I tell you, it broke my heart and felt as though my life had completely gone wrong, I could not emphasize that enough, how I felt at the time.
So people will know this, even though I left it out. You are living in Scotland,
I live in
right?
Scotland, yes.
So this was the Scottish school system,
Mm.
but a school system and a school teacher is pretty much the same around the world. But there are differences, but
Yeah.
we can imagine, what was it like to love teaching, which I think you did.
I did.
You came to your calling late in life. You qualified at age 47 to do what you thought was your new life.
Yeah.
And then how many years into it? 6 or 7?
7 years.
And did it come
Oh,
on gradually, this thing that you call burnout? Did it have a psychological component as well? Like where I know the energy was gone with fibromyalgia, and then there's pain, and burnout, of course, is psychological, but did you start to hate teaching? Did you
I
start?
loved it till the very end. I loved it till
So
the end. Yeah.
So was this like a torment when you were physically stopped from teaching? Your body wouldn't do it, but your mind was saying, go, I want to, I like it.
Yeah.
Oh, this is bigger than I had heard it before.
Yeah.
When
And
I heard it before, I heard you were flattened, couldn't go, and that's true, right?
that's
But
true.
I didn't hear the conflict.
Mm,
And that's what so many people in this community, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Yeah, but maybe, but I'm so old. But how can you change? But I want to. But.
yeah.
So did one die down? Did the emotions die down just because physically? No, it kept up.
Mhm.
Okay, now
Uh,
go to the next part. How
for,
did you come to write this letter that I know you wrote? How
well,
did you
for
get
the first kind of 18 months to 2 years of being unwell, I would take time off sick, and all I thought about was going back to school. And I reduced my hours. I stopped being head of year and went back to being a classroom teacher. But I was completely motivated to get back. And that all culminated in going back to school in August 2016, sitting in the pre um, before the kids came back, we always had in-service days, sitting in those in-service days with the other teachers after a 7-week holiday, 4 of which I'd spent in Italy, knowing that I was exhausted on that day as I'd been when I left on holiday 7 weeks before. And at
oh,
that point, knowing it was over and I didn't want it to be over. So
wow.
that then became this period of me feeling very depressed, very confused. You used the word vocation earlier. I thought teaching was my vocation. And I couldn't understand how it had all gone wrong. You know, this was the thing that I loved to do. I was good at it as well, you know.
Let's
Um,
just take a bookmark here, Susan. Let's everybody get into this story. She finds her joy, she finds her passion, she's excellent at it, she's devoted. Her body gives out, she rests, she takes time off, she goes on vacation, she comes back exhausted. But the place I want to put a bookmark in, you knew, you heard something, you felt something when you saw you were just as exhausted as when you took time off, you knew it was over. And everybody has times we like to pretend sometimes we don't hear things. You heard that. You know, people say, well, you hear from spirit, but I don't. Oh no, you do, but you don't want to listen. And,
yeah,
and so let's all put ourselves in Susan's place and see how hard it might be to acknowledge it. Did you acknowledge it at that point?
no, I
No,
was
like
still,
just like the
I was,
rest of us.
I was still fighting it. And as well as all of that having happened, I'd always been interested in spirituality. I'd always felt as though I wanted to work with women. I'd worked with women in a kind of adult education way. I used to teach assertiveness training when that was a popular thing in the 80s and 90s, I think it probably was. So there'd always been this thing, but in my head was, no, you need a proper job. You know, that you can't do all that woo-woo stuff. You know, you need a proper job. And I remember hearing
Oh,
Oprah saying, God speaks to you in a whisper, then he speaks in a louder voice, and then you get a brick upside the head. And that burnout was my brick upside the head. And shortly after leaving, I started doing the artist's way, which was something I had dabbled in for many years. And I started to do, I actually just looked at it today, strangely. I walked out of school on the 1st of September 2016, knowing I wouldn't be going back. And I started the Artist's Way on the 16th of September, so
wow.
15 days later. And the first thing I wrote in my morning pages was, I am sitting in the garden. I'm off sick from school again. I won't be going back. Now,
Wow.
that wasn't, I won't be going back. That was, I won't be going back. What is next? And what
But
happened?
let's just put another bookmark here because for those who don't know the artist's way, these morning pages are to almost write from spirit in the sense that you're not trying to write a journal that somebody would read later and write in proper English. You just wake up and you write down whatever, if you will, your unconscious or spirit or whatever the moment wants to tell you. You don't fix the English. You don't necessarily put punctuation in unless it just happens. And so it's a way for people who don't have a different pathway or people who just like this to let life reveal itself in the moment.
Yeah.
And so you don't need to buy the artist's way. You don't need to do any of the rest. But if you feel like you would like to know a little more about what consciousness, God, spirit, life, whatever your word is, if you would like to know what's up with you, for you, what's up next, what does this moment want to tell you, you might just pick up a pad tomorrow morning, either with your coffee or before you take your coffee. I find that I love coffee, but it puts me into maybe even a more positive state than I woke up in. And so if you need to know what's really going on for you, you might do it before your coffee if you're like me.
Yeah.
If you're not a coffee drinker, never mind. But even it's still relevant because you could do your pages before you're fully awake. That's when you find out what's going on. So
Yeah.
go ahead, please, Susan.
Yeah. So, what I wanted to know was, why did this all go wrong? How did I get it so badly wrong? That was
Mm,
how I felt. I blamed myself.
yeah, you were judging. You were
Yeah. I
judging
was judging
this
myself.
thing that happened.
Mm.
And this is not, you chose this burnout. Like people want to say they chose all these things. It
No.
was chosen for you. It
Yeah.
bypassed your mind. It was not your emotions. You didn't get what you consciously wanted. You got the next step.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as part of that process, at some point, um, I think probably during the next year, one of the things that I wrote in, I don't know, I can't remember if it was morning pages or whether it was just in my journal in general, was that I was still asking questions like, but I thought I was supposed to be a teacher. I thought that was my vocation. I could not get to the bottom of this, how I got it so badly wrong. And out of my pen came, you're not a teacher of mathematics, you're a teacher of God.
Oh my
I
God.
thought, what the bloody hell is a teacher of God? And so I Googled Teacher of God and up popped Teachers of God Foundation, top of the Google search. And I sat on that for probably 18 months and it came
No.
over and over and over and over again. I did Lisa Natoli's 40-day program I think it was in 2017, because I was kind of stalking them. I wanted to know, who are these people? And it wouldn't leave me. It just wouldn't leave me. And I knew that I had to make contact with them. So eventually I wrote an email to Lisa Natoli at Teachers of God Foundation and said, you probably will think I'm a crazy person, but I think I need to work for you. And she wrote back and said, I've passed your email to my husband, Bill Free, who runs Teachers of God Foundation, and he'll be in touch. And we set up a Zoom meeting, and we got on the Zoom meeting, and Bill said, so you want to work with us? So I told him the story, what had led up to it, and my sitting on this You're a Teacher of
And
God.
Susan, were you feeling well then at this
Yes, I was.
moment?
I was well then. I trained as a life coach by this time. I'd set up my own business. I had more clarity around, what I was doing. But this element, this Teacher of God element, was still there. And he said to me, well, what's your skill set? We do actually have an opening at the moment, had just come. And he said, what's your skill set? And I didn't really have a skill set that matched running an online community, which I ended up doing. And he said, well, I like the story. You're here, I'll give you a 90-day trial. And that culminated in me working for the Teachers of God Foundation, becoming Director of Operations
What
for
what
6.5
what
years.
did it give you first? Because I know later you ended up interviewing people, you held classes, but what did he give you first? Because you weren't identifying yourself as a techie person or a leader of an office community. What work did he give you to try you out?
So at that point, the Teachers of God Foundation had moved from having their program called the Transformation Room, which you maybe remember, to starting something called the Presenter Series.
Yeah.
So my job was to engage spiritual teachers to
Oh,
come and present month-long classes, to host them on Zoom, to set it all up. I had an assistant, because I didn't know any of the tech stuff. I had an assistant who did the nuts and bolts. And what I did was just get on Zoom with spiritual teachers and say to them, we'd love you to come, and, let's sort out a curriculum. So my curriculum development skills as a school teacher came in handy. The way people learn came in handy. My ability to speak in front of groups of people, because I'd been head of year, I took assemblies at school, all of those skills that I didn't know were a skill set came in handy for all of that.
okay. And I want to speak to another dimension. Does everybody who's meeting Susan for the first time notice how attractive her voice is? We like the Scottish British accents in this country. We
Yeah.
fall in love. Do you notice how friendly she is? How they talk about the likability factor. It's not about whether someone is truly likable more than someone else. It's kind of a personality attribute that some people come forth with at first, like it's one of the first things that you see. There's no way that Susan, out of her individual separate self, could even maybe even know those things about herself. This is Americans will love you. Your voice will get you in the door. People internationally will welcome the Zoom call. You're going to get a lot of yeses. Can you see, I'm talking to our community, can you see the hand of spirit in this first 90 days, putting Susan in that particular job for her first 90 days? Like, isn't she like the perfect person to invite strangers, people she had no relationship with? It's like it's like a cold call sales, except she's already in the door because of her essence. Can you see how Spirit worked with Bill Free to give her that job? Because there were other things needed in the organization. He could have said, well, I don't know you. Maybe we should give you a safer job where you're back behind. Let's see if you can learn the tech. I mean, a lot of people would have been careful instead of putting you out there as the representative of the organization, inviting the whole presenter series. I mean, it was all dependent on that. So I am feeling the hand of Spirit, which people want to hold on to the advantages of the mind. People argue for their minds. Well, let me just get it intellectually. Can you just explain, as though they're defending the value of the mind overall, the planning? And for me, this is just such evidence how if you just acknowledge what already happens that's bigger than the people could ever think of, it's magic. Couldn't we all go along for the ride in our lives, seeing what Spirit has next? What is the orchestration that's so much bigger than I could do?
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me riff on that, because it's big. I mean, it's huge. They does everybody understand that Teachers of God was dependent on this presenter series going financially, exponentially, for growth? This was a big deal. They put someone they didn't know, who was maybe a whack job, who couldn't finish being a math teacher. She got sick. Maybe she'll be sick again tomorrow. She comes from Scotland. She doesn't know our, right?
Yeah, yeah. Testament to Bill Free, really.
Well, no, it's a testament to Spirit working through everyone, and you don't really have much say. What if we don't really have as much say to what's next as
Yeah,
we want to
that's
think?
very true. Yeah. And then the next thing that happened after that was, these teachers would come in and present classes on a Monday. And then I thought, wouldn't it be good if we could meet together, if the people who attended those classes could meet together on the weekend, because being a previous school teacher, I would say to the teachers, could you give them some homework? Could you give them something that they can, engage with until the next class? And I thought it would be really good if we could meet together on Zoom and have a discussion about how the teaching was landing, because it seemed important to me not to just consume a load of teachings, but to actually integrate them. And so I started the Saturday gatherings, which then evolved into the Evolve community. And that took on a kind of life of its own. I discovered that I liked doing guided meditations because people liked my Scottish accent. They found it soothing, and that they could go deeply into meditation when I was guiding them. And I like to provide music that complemented the teaching, and then facilitate discussions and sharing. And that community, I led that community for 6.5 years, and it was, what it was like. It was a very, very precious, supportive, wonderful community that I'm proud to have been part of.
Yes, and you helped it grow, and also you brought the community part into focus. It became more than this teaching and that teaching, or this teacher and that teacher. But because of you, it really, I think they had a community when they had the Friday meetings,
Yeah,
years
and in
and years
person
ago
community.
in
Yeah,
person.
yeah,
But I think just being somewhat of an outsider and somewhat of an insider, I've been a foundational member of Evolve and all the other words it was before it was Evolve. But what I observed is that your sense and motivation, like you just said, what about Saturday, to continue what happened and not just have it be intellect, but it be relational. From that built a powerful community that exists today. So let's fast forward. This is magical. This is perfect for you, for the what I always think of them as teachers of God, for the awareness Center for Awakening community. Wouldn't this be the rest of your life? You're not 22. Nobody over there is 22, hardly anyway. We would assume this is it. It's happy for everyone. It's working. And then what? What else? Why anything else? Tell us about now. Bring us more up to date. We're skipping a whole lot of years,
yeah,
everybody.
yeah. So, one of the things I think it's important to say before I say this part is, in those intervening years, during those 6 and a bit years, one of the teachers who came to Teachers of God Foundation, as it was then, was Jacqueline Eckert, who came from the organization Awakening Together. And she brought Regina Dawn Akers to talk about a specific thing. And I remember Cindy Krupp and I interviewed or hosted this special meeting with Jacqueline Eckert and Regina Dawn Akers. And when you look at the recording of it, I'm like this. Who is this woman? Who is this woman? And that culminated on me doing the ministerial preparation program over at Awakening Together, which seemed kind of odd when I was at Teachers of God Foundation, and becoming an ordained minister at Awakening Together. So those two things were going on in parallel. And
But
then,
you followed the flow even when you didn't want to.
yeah,
So
even when it made no sense.
now, even when it made no sense, but even going back to when you wanted to be a teacher and you weren't allowed to be a teacher, like it was a no. The universe, whatever your word is, was saying no, and you're saying yes, but you'd probably still be sick if you were trying to still be a teacher, because that was,
Do you know,
you know,
Rod, I actually think I would be dead.
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I honestly do. If I
Yeah,
didn't
because
keep pushing against.
the universe only gives you, or spirit, the divine, only gives you that short window to fight,
Yeah,
and then it wins.
yeah, yeah. So in the Evolve community, there was a woman who was coming toward the end of her life. And I had conversations with that woman. I facilitated a celebration of life for her within the Evolve community before she died. Um, I She asked me to prepare a meditative recording that she could listen to. And during the whole of that process, I was very impacted by working with this woman. And someone in the Evolve community said to me afterwards, Susan, you should really be an end of life doula. And it was another phrase like teacher of God. I thought, what's an end of life doula? Because it's not, there are end of life doulas in the UK, but it's not commonplace. And I personally had not heard of it. But something just ding, I had that sense again of, a light came on and it was pulling me towards it. And
So
so,
everybody, listen to that. remember when she heard Teachers of God and now she heard End of Life? When there's something in a room that you've never looked at and all of a sudden you look at it, maybe there's a message like in that clock. My eyes just went to that clock. If you hear words that have a different vibration, listen. This is how life speaks to us. End of life doula. What is that?
Exactly.
Let's pay attention.
Yeah.
That is how the movements happen.
Mhm. And I
Wow.
actually said to that person who mentioned End of Life Doula, oh, I think that's probably an American thing. We won't have these in Scotland. That was what I said. But there was this kind of, I call it the joy tingles. There's this kind of
So it
tingling.
doesn't matter when your mind says no, when your personality says no. You should be that. No, we don't even have that. And
We don't have that, yeah.
but it doesn't matter. Go
Yeah.
ahead, please.
And after the call, after that the Evolve meeting, I immediately Googled End of Life Doula UK, and up popped a training course. You couldn't make this stuff up. A training course 22 miles from my front door.
No, no.
And but everything was like, my hair was almost standing on end. And it was like, this is your next step. This is it. So I immediately signed on to that training course and started. And gradually I started to realize that as the light increased around this end of life doula, the light was decreasing around the Evolve community.
Sure, because you're supposed to leave. So it had to the decrease. And it might have appeared it's because of this and it's because of that. But when spirit or life wants you to move on, that's what it does. Then you start picking apart or finding things or reasons. Reasons. We want to have reasons for doing everything.
I didn't actually, though. I didn't have reasons. No, I
No,
just,
but we want to. Don't
yeah,
we want to? Like make it make sense?
yeah, yes. But what I'm saying is that was not my experience. It was just simply a knowing that it was over, that it had
Yeah, and you're
naturally
further
come to an
along.
end.
Now you're further along. You know that feeling of it's over. You've been through this before.
Yeah.
You don't need to be hammered.
I don't need the brick upside the head any longer.
You don't need to be sick before you leave. No.
Yes, exactly.
How beautiful.
Exactly. Yeah.
So tell us about this. What is your life like now? You're an end of life doula. I saw you change the wording of that in your bio.
In training.
Was
I'm an
oh
end of
yeah, no,
life.
you just took that. See, here I often hear death doula, but it's called end of life doula, the way
Yeah.
Scottish would have a better way to say it.
Yeah. That's just the name of the professional
Program.
body that I'm part of, is End of Life Doula UK.
Yeah,
And I've moved from the foundation. I've done the foundation training, the foundational training, and now I'm doing the diploma, which is so that's why I call myself an end of life doula in training, because until I've completed the diploma, which takes 18 months, I'm not able to call myself an end of life doula.
I see. And so for those of us who are not acquainted with that term, what is an end of life doula?
So it's someone who accompanies someone who's at the end of their life, who perhaps has had a terminal diagnosis or has a life limiting illness, and who perhaps does not want their death to be overly medicalized, or they want choices around treatment, around how they want to die. Perhaps they want to die at home rather than in a hospital. They perhaps want to look at end of life planning. You know what they want do they want to be resuscitated? And if so, in what circumstances? How do they want their funeral to be? And this is another thing that I've just completed, is I've trained to be a funeral celebrant. One of the things that I did after I left teaching was I became a wedding celebrant. And so I've conducted a lot of wedding ceremonies, and it felt right for me to train as a funeral celebrant. And one of the things that I want to bring to the doula role is to actually help the person to construct the funeral ceremony that they want, in the knowledge that it will be me who delivers it. Because often at funerals, people say things like, that it was a lovely ceremony, but that guy never met my dad.
Yeah.
So I just think it's such a beautiful thing to accompany someone to the end of their life, and the final service that you perform is their funeral.
Yeah, I love the word celebrant, because we're not just celebrating life. I feel we're celebrating a death well done,
yes,
celebrating going toward what is the inevitable rather than fighting the inevitable. And I want this to stay about you, but I just have to say that I'm writing a TED Talk about death, and how our narrative about death is that it's bad and depressing. You know, uh, the title of it is Dead Wrong About Death, because in English we have so many died on stage. It's a bad thing. Every time dead is with a word, it's a bad thing.
yeah.
And yet we're all going to die. So this process of resisting is really sucking life out of life, while we're resisting death. And so I'm so sensitive to words like celebrant, because it's a hard sell to TEDx to say, actually, this is something you want to spread the word on. And it's a hard sell because it's a cultural narrative really pretty much around the world. There are still a few places where it's slightly different, but this is winning. This narrative is winning. And so I love what you're doing. Can you tell us how being an end of life doula might be different from what happens in hospice? Because in hospice, I know the person there would be nobody dedicated to the memorial. But hospice in this country starts with a terminal diagnosis, and then right now it can go on a long time. So it's not, it's when you start doing palliative care, there's no more treatments. That qualifies a person for hospice, but they're hospice services, but they're not near death necessarily. And so could you just amplify the differences between an end of life doula and hospice?
Well, an end of life doula may work inside a hospice, or may work alongside hospice at home providers. But I think that the important thing is, when someone comes to the point of hospice, it's almost felt that, and even sometimes from the point of diagnosis, that I have a terminal illness now, my life's over. And one of the things is, there is a lot of life left to be lived between diagnosis and death. And the doula comes alongside the person to to say, what does that look like? How do you want that to be? And often family members will say, I don't want to talk about this. We're hopeful of a cure. We're hopeful of longer. And so often the person who is dealing with the diagnosis does not get the opportunity to speak freely about how they feel, the things. They try to have conversations, and those conversations can be shut down. I don't want to talk about this, I'm not ready to talk about death. And one of the things that I'm is in the planning stage is I'm going to start a podcast around death and dying, and I'm going to call it, because people say, oh, don't mention the D word, don't mention the D word. I'm going to call it, let's mention the D word. Because I think the zeitgeist is changing, that people are becoming more open to having conversations. And the more of us that speak in public, like your TED Talk, the more of us that speak in public about death and dying, the more it opens up and people can think about and talk about and be more comfortable around people who are dying, who often feel very lonely and very isolated.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited about your podcast. Please keep us informed. I will let everyone know when it is live and people can listen, because that's just by bringing mortality into our everyday life is just better. But it's a hard sell with just through the mind. We have to have the experience. I was talking to someone about my TED talk, and it was actually a person who's having a very difficult time with grief. She is struggling, and she told me about an app. You may know about this, that I think it's 5 times a day you get a message about death, that you're going to die. And even though I was preparing this TED talk, my first reaction was, I don't want this. I don't want 5 times a day. And of course, then I signed up. That's not my final answer. But it was very interesting that was still in me from the conditioning that death is bad. I don't want to ring my day 5 times a day. No, it actually makes me smile. And this comes from Bhutan, where they believe that 5 times a day, if you remember death, you'll be happier in life.
Yeah.
Uh,
What's the name of the app, Rosalind?
we croak. We CROAK, and it's free,
Yeah.
and everybody's welcome. It has inspirational quotes,
Mm.
but very dry. You
Mm.
know, uh, they're not meant to be like a comedian, but they're very thoughtful.
Mm.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah, for that. Yeah.
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 So, well, what would you like people to know about working with you? Because Susan, this is your specialty now, but you have a women's group that's international. You are a very inspired teacher. You're, I would say, you add to it, but I would say, if people are more interested in a practical way to live with non-duality, and A Course in Miracles, I think you still use that. Is that correct?
No, I don't. It's
Okay.
I don't any longer. I did. I did. It
Yeah,
was
I
part of
did
my
too.
path,
I
but
did
no
too.
longer.
But once I found non-duality, I couldn't do that. Yeah. But I do appreciate it, as I know you do as well.
Yeah.
So if this non-duality, meaning not two, just the oneness, if you're at all wondering, how do I apply that to living in the world? I think Susan might be your next step. And tell us about this group that's international.
Yeah. So it's called, my program is called Slowing Down to the Speed of Grace.
Let's
And
just take that in. Slowing down to the speed of grace.
yeah.
Wow, that's so poetic. Yeah.
And that came in another, another journal, was in trying to make sense of what had happened to me. I wrote in my journal that these lessons, this would be learned through grace or not at all. They were the very words. I remember writing them, and I put them in a blog post. It will be learned through grace or not at all. And what I needed to do was slow down to the speed of grace, not rush ahead, just develop that ability to listen to that inner voice and to trust it, and that would guide me, and it has. And so I developed a program to help other women to do the same, to start to listen to that inner voice, to clear away all the conditioned beliefs that we have that block. The Course in Miracles says it so well, about the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And that's what happens. That is what happens until you
So
realize
if
you are love
people, oh,
presence.
I'm sorry. Yeah, if people want to just have some more time with you before they find out about the program, because I know that people like to have a lot of time with a person before they sign up for something. There's a Facebook group, is that right?
I'm actually, the Facebook group is closing at the end of
Oh,
September. Yeah.
okay.
I've moved my writing and the way I communicate primarily onto Substack. Um,
Okay.
now
Is that free? Is
Substack,
that
that's free.
something?
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a free element and there's a paid element. Um, and yeah, so that's a good place to find my writing. It's also called Slowing Down to the Speed of Grace.
Can you send me the link
The
so I
link
can
to
put that?
Substack.
I don't think that's in your bio. Is
Yeah.
it? No.
Probably not. No, I think I just linked to my website. So
Yeah.
I'll put
Oh,
you the
well, they'll
Substack.
find it on your website. Will they find
They
it on your?
will. Yeah, it's under.
Okay, and that's good enough. That's good enough.
Yeah,
Yes, go to Susan's website. You'll
yeah,
learn more. You'll see how to contact her. You'll find out about this course that's with women, and follow Susan, because are you on social media?
yeah, yeah. I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
Instagram.
Yeah,
Great. Uh, I know you'll find the same joy and pleasure, and I want to say fulfillment. Every time I've been in your presence, even if it's in a group, I feel filled with who you are. Your essence is transformational for me. So, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Thank you all.
thank
Bye
you.
for now.